stop for a second. Because if this one claim is even partially true, then what we are witnessing right now is not just another strike, it is the moment a global defense illusion may have just started to crack. And the strange part is, most people still don't realize how big this could actually become. Iran is claiming its Arash-2 drone slipped through Israel's defense systems and reached Ben Gurion Airport. But the real question is not whether it hit or not. The real question is, how did it even get that far? Because systems like these are not supposed to fail so easily. And yet, something about this situation feels different. Because this was not a random location. This was not a symbolic strike. This was something much more calculated. According to the claims, the target was fuel infrastructure supporting military aircraft. That means this was not about damage alone. It was about capability. It was about control of the air. And once you start targeting that, everything begins to change. But here's where it gets even more serious. Iran is saying this was not a one-time strike. They are calling it part of a pre-planned sequence. A sequence built around a target list. A list that may already be in motion. And if that is true, then this is only the beginning. Because now the story shifts from one strike to what comes next. The drone itself is not being treated like a normal drone anymore. It carries more payload than earlier models. It travels longer distances. And most importantly, it is harder to detect. The combination creates a new kind of problem, a problem that traditional systems were not designed for. That is why some experts are calling it something else, not just a drone, but a low-cost cruise missile. And that one shift in definition changes everything, because cruise missiles are not random tools. They are designed for precision. They are used to hit critical infrastructure. And they are used when the objective is long-term impact. Now think about the distance involved. Tehran to Tel Aviv is within range. That means this system was built with purpose. It was built to reach, it was built to bypass, and it was built to arrive. That is why even the name matters. Reports suggest it is referred to as the Israel hitting drone. That is not just a label. That is intent. And when intent meets capability, things escalate fast. But here's the question nobody is clearly answering. If this airport can be reached, what else can be reached? Because that is where the fear begins. It is no longer about one location. It is about system limits. And this is where the narrative begins to split. One side says defenses are holding. The other says penetration is happening. Both cannot be fully correct, which means something is not being fully shown. And that is where uncertainty grows. Now look at what happened before this claim. Aircraft at the same airport were damaged. Some were burned. Some were destroyed. Officials said it was debris. But that explanation creates another question. If debris can cause this much damage, then what happens with direct impact? Because that is a completely different scenario. And that is where things start to feel unstable. Because even success is causing damage. The defense works, but the consequences still land. And when those consequences hit critical zones, the system starts to feel pressure. That pressure spreads quickly. Flights get restricted. Operations slow down. Movement becomes limited. And alternatives begin to appear. That is not normal behavior, that is reaction. And reaction means something changed. Now here is something even more revealing. Aircraft were moved out before escalation peaked. Empty flights. No passengers. Just relocation. That decision alone tells a deeper story. Because systems prepare before they react. And this looks like preparation. Which raises another question. What did they see coming? Because they clearly expected something. Now take a step back. This airport is not just civilian. It has strategic importance. It supports movement. It supports logistics. It supports operations. That makes it a high-value target. And high-value targets change the rules. Because hitting them creates ripple effects. Economic, military, psychological. And those ripple effects do not stay contained. They spread. Now add another layer. Trade dependency. If most flow moves through the system, then disruption becomes pressure. Not just local pressure. National pressure. And that is where strategy becomes visible. Because this is not random. This is targeted. Now comes the part many ignore. The math. Volume changes everything. More drones. More attempts. More pressure. Even small success rates become big problems. Because scale multiplies impact. And impact creates response. Now combine that with cost. Cheap attack. Expensive defense. That imbalance builds over time. And over time, imbalance becomes weakness. That is how attrition begins. Slow at first, then visible, then unavoidable. And in attrition, production matters. Not just performance. If production continues, pressure continues. And if pressure continues, systems begin to stretch. Now zoom out further. This is not isolated anymore. Effects are spreading. Regions are watching. Systems are adjusting and tensions are rising. That is how expansion begins. Quietly, then rapidly. And just as this unfolds, another layer appears. Strategic tension, Energy concerns? Global attention. This is no longer local. It is connected. Multiple fronts, multiple pressures, one timeline, and everything is happening at once. Which brings us back to the start. One drone, one claim, one question. Was this a warning or was this a demonstration? Because if it was a demonstration, then something bigger is coming. And if it was a warning, then it may not have been understood. Either way, the situation is changing, and it is changing fast. Because once a system is tested, it gets tested again and again until limits are found. And once limits are found, they get pushed. That is how escalation works, step by step, layer by layer, until it cannot be ignored. So now the real question is simple. What happens next? Because this is not the end, this is the setup. And setups always lead somewhere. The only question is where, and how far, and how fast. Because once momentum builds, it is hard to stop. And right now, momentum is building, quietly but clearly. And those who are watching closely can already see it forming, which is why this matters, not just for today, but for what comes next. Because next is where the real story is, and next is still unknown. That uncertainty is the real risk, because unknown outcomes create unstable systems, and unstable systems react unpredictably, which means anything can happen. And when anything can happen, everything becomes possible. So now I want to know what you think. Do you think this was just one event, or the beginning of something larger? Because this story is not finished. It is unfolding in real time, and we are only seeing part of it. The rest is still coming, and when it comes, it may change everything again. So stay focused, stay aware, because this is not over, not even close. And the next move might already be in motion, waiting, preparing, building. And when it happens, it will answer all these questions. But until then, we are watching a system being tested and possibly being pushed to its limits. Now tell me, where do you think this goes from here? Because your perspective matters. Drop your opinion below and be part of the conversation. Because conversations shape understanding, and understanding shapes awareness, and awareness is what keeps you ahead. So don't miss what comes next, because next is everything. And everything is still unfolding right now in front of us, one step at a time, one move at a time, one decision at a time, and each one matters more than it seems. So stay with this story, because it is not done yet, not even close. And when it continues, you will want to know first. So subscribe to Market Mindset, like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and stay ready. Because the next update might change everything again, and you don't want to miss that. Not this time, not now, because now is where it all begins, and what begins rarely ends quietly. It grows. And this is just the start.